Hey, good morning everyone. It's Caleb Rhodes. So this week I'm out doing some training. As you can see behind me, it is a very beautiful morning. And I was reading this morning and some things come to mind that I'd like to share with you for this week's video. I was reading in the book of Acts, chapter number 7, and we'll start in verse 17. I'll read it to you. It says, "As the time was drawing near to fulfill the promise that God had made to Abraham, the people flourished and multiplied in Egypt, until a different king ruled over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. He dealt deceitfully with our race and oppressed our forefathers by making them leave their infants outside so they wouldn't survive. At this time, Moses was born, and he was beautiful before God. He was nursed in his father's home 3 months, and when he was left outside, Pharaoh's daughter adopted and raised him as her own son. So Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in his speech and actions." So at this part in Acts, we got a man by the name of Stephen who was preaching a sermon, and he was reflecting back on Moses and the time period that Moses was being born into. So the situation was there was a corrupt ruler that was leading the Egyptians that had the Hebrew people in slavery. And it said that this ruler was dealing deceitfully with their race. So he was unaware of the grace of God that had been shown through Joseph. And he was also persecuting God's people. But God had a plan. Said at this time Moses, who we know would go on to be God's human instrument for salvation of the Hebrew people to bring them out of slavery, says that Moses was born and that he was beautiful or pleasing to God. But you know, even though Moses was one of God's chosen, he was not exempt from the persecution. In fact, if he had not faced the persecution, then he would not have received proper preparation in order to fulfill God's plan for his life. We see there in verse 22, it says, "So Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in his speech and actions." So my prayer today is that God would use the persecution that is occurring in our lives, and I believe that's rearing its head here in America, to bring about prosperity for his people. So I encourage you, next time you see persecution, or next time maybe that you experience persecution, pray that God would use that experience in your life and in the lives of other believers around the world to bring about prosperity for his people and ultimately for the church. God bless.